So number 5, also from 1985, is Paul's. Well, you're at halfway point. What is it?
It's a-ha, another band that were massive at this point. They released one video, one single, Take On Me, which initially wasn't a success, but on reissue with the groundbreaking video that we all recall of Morton Harkett and the girl animated sort of through the video and escaping together, made it a massive smash. A year later, The Sun Always Shines on TV will be their sole number 1 to date. I've chosen a track called Living a Boy's Adventure Tale, which is halfway through the album, Hunting High and Low. But for me, it's a beautiful record. I didn't want to go for an obvious a-ha record. It's like the previous 2 choices. This comes from an album that you just have to listen to from start to finish, and I've done so again this week as I was preparing for the show. And 30 years plus later, it still sort of flows and sounds wonderful together. a-ha were another band that, kind of like Adam Ant, I was a big fan of in the sort of mid-80s.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think from looking, I saw got these massive posters that were sort of adorning the bedroom wall. I bought this on cassette at the time, so certainly got into this straight away. And I guess it would be a bit of a guilty secret, sort of in subsequent years, because by the time the early 90s came, I was sort of more into my indie music. So to then go and buy it on CD would not fit in with the likes of the Manic Street Preachers and the Happy Mondays and everything. But I've always loved a-ha. Their greatest hit, Psalm 25, that came out a few years ago, is stunning, sort of covering 25 years career.
I'll have to give that a listen.
Still doing great music and still touring.
So they're still doing recording new stuff as well, are they? Or
I'm not sure when the last album
No.
was, but they are still performing together, certainly.
Right.
So, yeah.
Here they are, living a boy's adventure tale.
As you say, I was at the midpoint
You are at the
now,
midpoint,
so
yes.
I'm just going to give a brief mention to a group that I didn't include, but have been a group that I've sort of followed their career from its inception in sort of 1986, 87, through to their final release in 2012. Now, when they first appeared on the circuits, they were the bad boys of rap, it's fair to say. There was much controversy. Opinions did change a bit over the years as one of the members, MCA, became an ardent Buddhist and so regularly organised Tibetan freedom concerts, annually even, from the mid-90s. And whilst the music stayed the same, they weren't as notorious as they had been in the late 80s. So I'm talking about the Beastie Boys, of course. So when they first appeared in the UK with the License to Ill album in 1987, they were banned from multiple places. Mike D, one of the members, was arrested for inciting a riot within 10 minutes of the performance. Obviously, they were encouraging car thefts worldwide for the VW badges that...
Really?
So people used to, because Mike D used to wear one.
Oh,
People
so
used to nick them off
people
cars
used to nick
and
'em.
wear them. I didn't. I should just add. I'm a good son of an Methodist minister. I'd be killed. But yeah, I always loved the Beastie Boys' career and always sort of, I've got all their albums and still love listening to them now. Very,
But it
very
didn't make your
different
list
to everything.
today.
Yes, it didn't make my list today. I didn't think it was appropriate really to play on your show.
Oh, well, as we've been saying from the Beastie Boys, what is your 6th pick?
Okay, well, I guess it links in nicely. It's The Sin.
Well, yeah. Did you see the Channel 4 drama called It's a Sin
I didn't.
last year?
No.
Obviously, the song appears quite a lot.
I have to say, I'm not a fan of Ollie Alexander in years and years. So whether that sort of put me off watching it. I understand it was very, very good.
It's brilliant. It is. I mean, really hard to watch, but it's brilliant. Yeah, it's and the song. It obviously it just play keep. It's wonderful program. But obviously, 1987.
Yeah. So this point, I would have been 87. I'd have been about 14. So this track was the second number 1 single for the Pet Shop Boys. It was from their second studio album. Actually, came out ahead of the release of the album, and both the song and the album feature in the 1000 albums/songs to hear before you die series.
Right.
So both extremely sort of recognised as successful.
Yeah.
It was originally written by Neil Tennant in about 15 minutes in 1982. reflecting on his time at a Catholic boys' school in Newcastle. It remains one of only 2 songs that have been performed live on every tour that the group has done ever since, the other being West End Girls. Now, there is a great version out there which they performed live from the mid-90s when they did a gig, did tours that included Rio, so there's a live album which incorporates that, and then they mash it up with Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive. So it starts off with the, because it's got a very similar sort of tune. So they start off with the vocals, well, the backing singer does the vocalist for I Will Survive before Neil kicks in with the opening vocals of the song. So this track I chose because like the a-ha and the Beastie Boys, I bought it on cassette. So late 80s, of course, Walkmans were all the rage. It meant that my parents didn't have to listen to my music. It meant I didn't have to listen to my sister's music, more importantly. And with this album, again, I would listen to the album as an entirety, but equally, because I love this track so much, I would often just rewind and listen to it again, or flip the cassette over and fast forward.
I was going to say, the fast forward button, didn't it?
And then turn it back over again and listen to it again.
Because
it's an astonishing track, and 30 odd years later, it's still
it's
still astonishing. It's still a fabulous song.
It's the same, Pet Shop Boys. Track 7 then is Def Leppard, who have got a new album out. Is it this
end of May?
It was announced
last week.
So, what's the track you've picked?
So we've got for Don't Shoot Shotgun, which is an album track from the Hysteria album, phenomenally successful album, was the 4th studio album for Def Leppard. So initially they'd had released the Pyromania album in 1983. It was so successful off the back of the first 2 albums that they decided they were going to go into the studio very quickly. So early 1984, they hit the studio to record the sequel, which they didn't know at this stage what it was going to be called. However, tragedy struck Christmas 1984 when drummer Rick Allen lost control of his car on Snake Pass in the accident.
I only heard about this yesterday at Wakefield 10K when I was commentating, and somebody told me about this quite randomly. I did not know that story till yesterday.
Yeah, so he lost control and lost his arm. Now, to give the band the credit, they didn't think about replacing him. They didn't think, how on earth are we going to go on? But over a few months of rehab with his drum tech, Rick realised, actually, I can play the drums using my feet. And so 4 months after the accident, was back in the studio with the band, and they built a special drum kit so that Rick could play with one arm, but predominantly with his feet, which is what he's done since that day.
That's amazing.
They did a mini tour of Ireland where they record a lot of their albums at the time, with a backup drummer, just to make sure that they were okay. The backup drummer didn't show up one day, and they realised, actually, we're finally just Rick doing this, which was confirmed when they headlined the Monsters of Rock Festival in 1986 with the reception that they got. So the album Hysteria went to #1 immediately on release in the UK. It took a year to get to #1 in the States, but did so following the success of the Pour Some Sugar On Me album. To date, the album sold over 20 million copies, and 6 of the 12 tracks that were on the album were released as singles in the US. 5 of them going top 10.
Wow.
Whilst in the UK, we had 5 singles released, all of them which went top 30. So I chose this because, as well as playing it constantly, I've lost count of the number of times I've owned it on cassette, on CD, and I think I've got at least 2 copies on vinyl. But when I was at school, this was the first year of the 2 years of GCSEs, and everybody at my school had 2 albums. They had Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction and Def Leppard's Hysteria, and they were just everywhere. This album was everywhere, as was Guns N' Roses one. The reason I chose this track rather than any of the singles was because I've always sort of, whilst I would play the album as a whole, this has always been the one that I've really loved for the way that initially you've got no instruments, you've just got the band's harmonies, because they've always sort of vocalised together, the 5 of them, and then the drum kicks in, and then the guitars, and then finally they're all together for just 4.5 minutes of just pure rock. As you mentioned, new album comes out in May, Dying Star Halos, and they're just about to hit the road in the US for their latest tour, which accompanies fellow rockers Motley Crue, Poison and Joan Jett. So we saw them a few years ago, supported by, playing alongside Whitesnake. Def Leppard were doing the headlining, and that was in their hometown of Sheffield. But yeah, always a good band to see live. Always great if you like rock music, and this is just a stunning track.
Here it is, turning up this one.